Hey everybody, long time no see. I finally got a camera set up again on a rainy day in California, so we'll see how the light does for us today. But I've got a new mic, thanks to my cousin Bob. Bob has sponsored this video by giving me my mic. I have a new pattern to go over with you. I'm actually still developing it, but instead of videoing it twice, I figure I would video it while I go through it. So this pattern is approximately from 1921 to early 1922. I would guess November, December of 21 to about February of 22, based on the number. So this is what it looks like. This is the original. As you can see, somebody, not me, has repaired it with tape at some point, which makes it somewhat tricky because that also is done on the back and cut off some of our instructions. So part of my dilemma for the past week or two has been trying to decipher in old pattern lingo what exactly they're talking about. This is a Pictorial Review pattern. Pictorial Review was a magazine in the 1920s through the 1930s. Actually, it started probably like turn of the century-ish. Pictorial Review also had their own line of patterns. This one, like I said, is about 21 to 22, and these phased out sometime in the late 1930s for a variety of reasons, one of them being that they had lawsuits against them from Simplicity, or McCall, I don't remember which one, that took them to court over the printed pattern patent, which they owned at the time. Now, this is pre-printed patterns. This one has no printing on any of the pieces. Of course, I've had to translate this. I've done it in half scale to test it out. So here is my version. Let's see if I can get me. There we go. And it's half scale to test it. So if you've never seen an original antique pattern before, maybe you've only worked with reproductions or costume patterns. They were of unprinted tissue paper. I've got some here. I'm trying to see a good one to show you. Here, I think this is the back of the vest. Single sizes, absolutely no markings other than dots. These dots here would be to show you where cut on the fold would be. The markings depended on the pattern company. Here we've got some dots near the waist. That would be for where to put the belt. There were notches and there were dots. The notches are, let's just say, more of a guideline than actually accurate. They almost never match up. Some are worse than others. Antique patterns, they're quirky. Like if you've never worked with an original one before, maybe you've only worked with a reproduction, they are quirky. So sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. You just never really know. So a little bit of experience is always good. And that's why I'm walking through it in half scale today, so that I can make sure that this thing actually does what it's supposed to do, which is look like this really cool cape. The cape is short in the front. That's the little jacket piece. And then it's eased around the armhole, and it makes this sort of like cool cape effect in the back. Now, you can't really tell that much, but gathered in is the front bodice to that really wide collar. So if you look really close, can you do it? There it goes. There's a little bit of gathering there. And like a lot of antique patterns, absolutely no markings for buttonholes. So you kind of just would go, I like the way it looks here. And then that's how you would figure out how you would do your buttonholes. Now, this Pictorial Review pattern is different in later ones. I think I already said that. And that there's absolutely no printing on it whatsoever. If you get into the ones in the mid-1930s and later, maybe even, I think some in the early 30s also. They did have a combination of printing and perforation, which is something that Simplicity did also. So there's a little history of sewing patterns for you. Simplicity transitioned to the fully printed pattern sometime in the 1940s, but did not before that because McCall owned the patent. And the patent for the McCall printed patterns was in the late 19-teens. And when the patent expired, and I don't remember if it was 18 or 28 years, one of those ones is a patent, it expired, and then everybody could go crazy and convert to printed patterns, which they didn't. Very quickly because the equipment was very expensive. So you'll see like Vogue, etc. Continue with perforated patterns well into the 1950s. Now, with perforated patterns, like I mentioned, there is a lot of quirks. That's because when they made them, they were stacked up really high. Like if you see industrial cutting machines now, where there's usually a hand operator that is doing a big rotary cutter on really, really thick piles of fabric. I'm not exactly sure if it was cut like that or if it was a die. However, the cutting process means that the ones that are lower in the stack would be shifting a little bit. So if you actually look at the patent for the printed pattern, it mentions that the reason why they converted to printing was because of the variances in the patterns when they were cut in the traditional method with just cuts and dots as opposed to actual printed markings, which were much more accurate. Side tangent. So, anyways, the pictorial review pattern did come with this, which is very uncommon for patterns of this era. It's like, late teens, early 20s. It came with this, which would be your extra instructions. Of course, I have remastered this and I am including it in the pattern packet. However, you get this and you get this. Those are your instructions. So do not expect that antique patterns or reproductions of antique patterns are going to have more than that. This one has been a challenge for me. And I'm used to these things. I've worked dozens, hundreds possibly, of antique patterns. This one's been a challenge because, like I mentioned, somebody somewhere along the line decided that it was a great idea to repair it with Scotch tape, which overlapped the writing. We also have bits of the envelope missing. So it's taken me a little. You would think a cape, would be pretty easy to figure out. It is kind of, except the cut's a little odd. So we're figuring it out as we go along. The notches do not match on this at all. At all. So I am probably going to move the notches. If not, come and watch this video to show you how to put it together. So let's see. This is our like I mentioned, half scale. I'm going to put it on this girl back here, who is my newish addition to my fleet. I'm going to put it on half scale. I'm going to walk through how we're going to put in the sleeve because that's the trickiest part. Keep in mind your pattern is obviously going to be full scale if you are purchasing this from my shop. And I would highly encourage you, if you want to make this, to go ahead and support my work by purchasing your pattern from my shop, because it's awesome when you do that, because then I can keep making cool old patterns. I'm starting again because I got a little bit confused. I swear the simpler that things seem, sometimes the more complicated they are. Now this has 3 main body pieces. There is a back vest, which you can see down here. And then there's the front vest, and then there's the capelet piece, which attaches through the armhole. That's what gives you that effect like that. Now there's also a belt piece on the back, which you can see down here. It's left free. It's just stitched to the side seams. And then there's a collar, which is a really wide, big collar. So these 3 body pieces are the bits that are a little confusing. The vest itself is relatively straightforward. It's pretty standard, except that there's no real shoulder seam like we think of, where it's very straight across and both just go together very easily. Instead, you've got a really weird easing thing going on with the cape and the front. The back is okay because if you can see, there's absolutely no notches here on the back. That means you just finish this with a bias facing. If you don't know how to do that, I've got tutorials on my blog that I've done ages ago. They're just photo tutorials, but they're still helpful if you don't know how to do that. I'll try to remember to put a link below. It's got a standard shoulder seam. It's cut on a fold. It's got a normal neck. It's got no fitting, no darts. There are some dots here for where you're going to place the back belt. The black belt is not really necessary, but if you want the period look, no one's going to see it because the cape's going to be over the top. It just kind of helps control the back fullness. So that would be at these dots here, and it would just be stitched at the side seam and left free, so it controls this fullness in the back. It's very, very, very normal for late teens and early 20s stuff. You'll see it in originals a lot of time. Now the front is here. So it has this big facing that's folded back on the line. I've given you a marked line for where to fold it back. I trued up the top edge so the notch should match pretty well and the shoulder should match pretty well. There's a line that I've given to you instead of dots where your center front is. This is where your buttons will go. The part that gets tricky is that this is a very strange curve, if you can see. There's also 3 sets of notches on this very strange curve. That's what kind of threw me, because being an old pattern, absolutely none of these notches match. I probably will go and drew them up a little bit for you. Maybe not, though. Maybe come and watch the video and see what the heck these notches are for. So there's, let's see, double notch here. There's a triple notch here, and there's a single notch here. There's also dots. There's a dot here, and I believe there's a dot on the other piece. Now, the rest of this, very normal. You've got like ease between gather between the 2 T's, and that's going to attach to your collar. You've got a normal side seam. The rest of it's not a big deal. Big deal is that weird curve, right? Now, the weird piece is the back piece, which makes the cape and the kind of like sleeve thing that's going on. It's not really a sleeve. It's like a drape thing. I don't know. They call it a sleeve. It's not really a sleeve. This is this gigantic piece, which has like weird stuff going on up here. And you cut it on fold. So it's very full. This is the fold here. It's very long. You can see in the illustration that it's like short in the front and long in the back, right? So the long piece is this. It doesn't tell us whether to hem it or not. So judging by the illustration, I'm going to say that this is going to be faced like a lining, right? Because it's like shaded, but there's absolutely no hem visible, and they don't tell us to hem it. So it's got the standard 3/8 inch seam allowance, which means that you're going to be dealing with this in 2 layers of fabric at once, which is going to be annoying. I'm not going to say it's not. It's going to be annoying, especially if your fabrics grow differently. But we'll deal with that later. For now, just know that this is cut on the fold. This is your back neck. This back neck will match up to the back neck of the vest. So the vest goes underneath this. And then you've got this weird situation with the notches to deal with. And you've got this bit. There are dots here. The dots fold back and make the facing for the sleeve. The weird notch situation, you've got a pivot point here. This is going to be around the bottom of the armhole. So you've got your front piece with the notches, and you've got this piece. What you're going to have to do is match the point of this, which is kind of like a shoulder point, and you're going to match the shoulder point of this together. And then you're going to have to walk your notches around and then pivot this point to match up to the armhole of this point. If you don't know what I mean, it's okay. I'm going to walk through it in fabric. But this is the reason why I'm making a half scale mock-up, because seeing it flat does not make any sense. So I'm hoping once I do it in 3D that all of a sudden I'll go, aha, here's how it works. And then I can help you to make yours, because I am not multi-sizing this. This thing's crazy. We are going to have the original single size 36-inch bust period pattern with the added markings. And like I said before, this is going to be a full scale pattern. It's not going to be half scale. I'm only making it half scale to test it out and to put it on this girl back here, because I need to see in 3D how this thing works. So let me switch to the overhead and we will look at how we're going to ease this together so that hopefully it helps you to also understand how to make this pattern. Okay, forgive me as I'm trying to figure out how to sew and do this on camera, and I'm not used to this. I'm used to being behind the camera, so it might be choppy. Anyways, I took the original instructions, which apparently I put somewhere safe, and I typed them up so that I can read them easier. They're not as choppy as the ones that are original because there's no tape like covering bits. I've also tried to decipher what was missing, so that will be in the pattern. The first thing it has you do is to take those front bits. So you've got the front piece like I showed you, which has the really big facing. You're going to want to turn under the raw edge of the facing bit and finish that in some way. And then you are going to fold it back and match these notches. So you're basically making your facing piece. So do that on both of them, and then it wants you to stay stitch this top edge together. So do that. I have not because I'm lazy, but do that if you're doing your real one. So again, turn back the facing and do your stay stitch here so that it holds everything together for you. And then after that, it goes right into matching those really, really weird notches. So what you're going to do is you're going to grab the big back piece, which is cut on the fold, and it's that weird one with the pivot. So here it is, cut half scale. And now you can really see that it looks like a back neck and kind of like shoulder piece, right? Except that this is going to be curving under, and by the time you get down here to this pivot point, which I have clipped into the seam allowance, you are going to ease that into the armhole, and then there's this dot which is on your pattern piece, and that's going to get folded back. So I'm going to pin that to place so it's a better visual for you, and I will show you what it looks like. All right, so I did take the two pieces, I did ease them together, and somehow miraculously they actually do work. The notches don't exactly match, but they actually do ease together, which is completely not expected because flat they did not do that for me. This is why it's good to test things in actual fabric sometimes. So there's 2 points that you need to work on when you're attaching the outer back to the front armhole of the vest piece. You're going to start it 3/8 of an inch away from the shoulder seam, like where the neck edge is, because you want to leave that back free for when you attach the back neck of the vest. So back that off until the seam line, not the cut edge. The underarm part where it attaches to the vest, there's a little extension that is coming out. Do you see how this is extra here? That is for the outer back piece. That is not for the vest. This is the outer back piece. There's also a dot on it. You want to pin it at the dot, and you don't want to stitch beyond that. So this one of the notch is the this one of the notch is the side seam of the front piece. So just so you have a visual, this is the side seam, this is the facing. So you're going to leave it free past the dot on the facing, which means that you're going to ease the arm together from the 3/8 inch of the neck to the dot at near the underarm of the facing bit. So really important is to clip in here. Like, do you remember the weird piece we had going on where it's like a big V? You clip into the seam allowance here. Like, not exactly at the seam allowance, but enough so that you can ease that around. And miraculously, it does actually ease together. So that's what it looks like before. Okay, so go slowly and pin it really well so that you ease those fabrics together, because the notches are a little bit like old patterns, kind of a little quirky, but it does actually work. So do that for both sides, and I'm going to stitch this, and then we're going to see what happens next. As I'm starting the other side, I'm realizing it could be helpful to show it another way. So like I mentioned, there is a starting point and an ending point. And this is going to be at the shoulder, the starting point, where you're going to back it off the amount of the shoulder seam. That's here. And then down here at the side seam where the extension is, right? So you're going to stop it at the dot. That's here. Now you've got all of this extra. And if you can see, there's quite a lot to ease in here. It will work. I mean, even if it works in half scale, it's definitely going to work in full scale. So start at your starting point, end at your ending point, and then deal with the extra to ease in. And there is a clip pivot point at the bottom of that V that I visualized in the last one. Clip that first before you even start easing it in, because that's going to really help you to get it together. And don't worry as much about the triple notches, because they're going to, like old patterns, it's going to give you a roundabout placement for them. Don't worry about that as much as just your ability to ease these two together. So work in small sections all the way across until it's all eased in perfectly and you don't get any puckers. And then you're going to start your stitching at the 3/8 inch in from the cut edge of the shoulder, and you're going to end it at the dot of the facing piece. Just go really slowly and stitch that all in so there's no puckers. And when I'm stitching this, just another quick note, stitch it from the side that has the most ease. So for me, that means I'm stitching it with the drastic curve, the clipped edge where it has the big V on the back. I'm putting that on the underside. So if I need to go back and reinforce that afterwards, I can. But this one right here between these notches at the top, that's the hardest part to ease in. So I am stitching with that side facing up towards me because then I can make sure that I'm easing it in. And I often will use a pin to help guide it through the machine, just very carefully. And I'll show you that if I can right now. Okay, I had to look at the instructions for a little bit and I got a bit confused. So what I'm going to suggest you do is skip ahead. Do not do the facing for the arm. Do not tack the arm yet because that really will help to see it in 3D on an actual body or on a dress form. So what I'm going to suggest that you do now, and I'm doing also, is attach the back of the vest to the outside of the cape. I am doing this so that the raw edge faces out. Now, if you remember when I had you match that curve, I had you start at 3/8 of an inch in from the cut edge of the shoulder. This is when that is important because now that it's free and you have like a hinge right there, you can match your 3/8 of an inch with this part, the inside point of the neck of the back, with this part. So you are going to match those two shoulder points together. You're going to match center backs together, and then I want you to ease in the outside of the cape to fit. It will be a significant amount of ease, it looks like. It doesn't seem gathered in the illustration. However, I don't see why you can't do that. We're just going to go with it because that's how the original pattern was. So the critical matching points, like I said, are the two shoulder points at 3/8 of an inch, at the neck edge, 3/8 of an inch, and then the center back. So let's ease those together and stitch that. After that, what you do with this outside, you tack this to the inside. It says tack it, doesn't say sew it. So you're just going to tack this edge to the inside of the cape. That was really tricky. So I might suggest that you run a basting stitch or like a gathering stitch there and help you to control the ease, because for me, I got some puckers in spite of my best efforts on the back neck. And now you have the inside to deal with. So the neck is stitched to place and you've got these two shoulder seams. What it wants you to do is tack the dot where you have on the outside edge of this shoulder seam. It wants you to tack it to the dot which is on the shoulder of the outside cape. Now the dots don't match for me. I find that the shoulder seam is quite a bit longer. It's probably going to end up being about 5/8 or larger when it's full size. So just tack it wherever you think that it drapes the best. But before you do that, what I think you're probably going to want to do is to finish this edge. I would use a seam binding to finish this edge, or serge it, or something like that. And you may also want to finish your armhole edge at this point. So these two outside edges, you want to finish that in some way. This one I suggest doing a bias facing towards the inside. This one I suggest you probably use a seam binding to finish that edge. After you've finished those edges, then tack it to the shoulder of the cape, which is on that line that we stitched before with all the wonky notches. You're going to just tack it into place. And make sure that it's nice and smooth, like from the outside. So what I would do is pin it where you think it looks good, and then put it on a dress form, or put it on yourself, or put it on a friend, something 3-dimensional so that you're not getting any weird pulling. So right now I'm just pinning it approximately where I think it's going to go. And if you look at it from the outside, it looks good. It doesn't look like it's puckering. It doesn't look like it's pulling weird. So that's what I would do. So finish the shoulder seam, finish the armhole edge, and then tack those shoulders to place near the dots. And then we move on to the next step. You've got your back side seams still open. So before we do that, what you need to do is grab your belt piece. So have your belt piece, it's cut on the fold. You're going to take the belt piece, open it up, and then fold this in half and stitch on this edge. These sides will be open, so turn it right side out, and then we will put this to place on the back belt on the outside where the dots are. There it is, stitched and pressed. Oops. There it is, stitched and pressed. And then we take our back vest, and you want to make sure that the cape is going up away from it so that you have your back vest like this. That's going to be the outside of the vest. And you have 2 dots that are on each side. You're going to pin this above the 2 dots on each side, and that will help control the fullness across the back. So let's stitch those to place above the 2 dots on the back side seams with this side out. After you have done this, it will be floating free like this in the middle. You want to match right sides together of the side seams. So you are going to do the front and the back together, right sides together, matching the notches. Now remember when we attached the front armhole for the cape part, you had to stop the stitching at the dot so you could form the facing of the sleeve of the cape. This thing's tricky. So you should have left it free at the side seam beyond the dot. That should allow you to access that side seam of the front. So take right sides together. Remember, this is the right side, the side where you can't see me. Seam allowance of where you attach the cape of the front armhole, that's the right side. So no seam allowances showing. Match those right sides together with the back vest. And it will help to visualize a circle of an armhole. So here we go. Right sides together. And there's your armhole circle, right? So go ahead and stitch those together, matching those notches all the way down on both sides, and then press those open. It's starting to look like an actual thing now. So here's the long cape piece. And underneath, you can see your vest sewn at the side seams and the belt across the back. So what we're going to do next is prep for the collar. So on the outside, where you should have basted those neck edges together at the front, run some gathering stitches between those 2 T markings that are on your pattern, and I have labeled that for where to gather also. So run your gathering stitches on both sides of the front neck edge. Also, get your collar ready. So the collar is really, really wide and big. So you are going to be stitching around the outside unmarked edges. So there's the 2 notches that are for the neck edge for where it attaches to the cape. You don't stitch that yet. You stitch the short edges and the long unmarked edge. So do that, clip your corners, turn it right side out, and then we will attach the collar to the cape. Unfortunately, my sound went out, so I'm going to have to do this as a voiceover. Here I have attached the collar. You can see I've sewn one side, and then there's the one side that's free. You're going to match the sewn edge to the edge of the fold back right there. So please ignore what I'm saying with my mouth. There's a gathered portion, which is gathered between the 2 T's. They're marked on your pattern here and here. So that's a critical marking point. So you're going to make it flush from the fold until the first T. Now on the back, there's some center backs to match. There's also a T and a dot that you're going to match on the center back, and then it's going to be left free after that. This gives you a lot of extra fabric you're going to have to ease in around the shoulder seam and other parts of the front. So as you can see here, I've got the gathered portion, and then I also have a lot of this ease that I need to put into the collar, and that's where the shoulder seam is. This is extremely fiddly and tricky, so go really, really slow and try to ease it in. You can see I've got the straight part here that goes until the first part of the gathers. Then I've got the other part of the gathers. I've got the 2 bits I need to ease in. So you're going to gather the one with the gathering stitches right there. And the other part near the shoulder seam is here. It's really tricky. So what you're going to do is work with the bias of the fabric. If you have a fabric that's really, really stiff, it may be too difficult. So using something that has a lot more ease is going to be better. That drastic curve right there, that is going to really come in together and make it so that you can set it into your collar. You want to use that almost bias edge to your advantage to be able to make it go in. Same with the back neck, the little curved portion towards the shoulder, you want to make that go in. The collar is in and it actually does work. You have to go very, very slowly at that curve where I mentioned for the facing. This is on the dress form, pinned at center front. You can see how long it is in the back. After you attach the collar, you are going to turn back the facing that was on the line given. Then you're going to tack this dot to the double dots to form your sleeve. So I have not done that yet. You're just going to tack it to place, try it on the body, and see where it best hangs for a sleeve. So again, this is finished for the sample anyways. The back is really long like this, and the belt is up here. It's meant to hang loosely in the back with controlled fullness by the belt. Very long in the back and shorter in the front. There are no markings for the buttons, so you're going to go off the illustration and put the buttons and buttonholes where you want. Now, because the center front is so far in here, you might do it off center. Or you can do it here at center front, but you may need to put a little snap or hook and eye here. And when the collar is worn open, you should see those gathers up there. Okay, that's it. That is this crazy puzzle of a pattern. I hope this video helps to visualize how this works, because it sure was a brain twister for me. You can find the pattern at wearinghistorypatterns.com, also Wearing History on Etsy once I get it up in my shops. Thanks so much.